why the retail market is so flush with product and availability and the lowest premiums we've seen, and kind of apathy, if you will, all of a sudden with the retail investing public. Yet at the top end, you're seeing a continuing major bleed down of all of the supply, where all of the coin stock comes from is being bled dry methodically, precipitously, and it is not stopping. At some point that trickles down into the retail market.
Wednesday, August 2nd, 2023, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Andy Schectman. He's the co-founder and CEO of Myers Franklin. Andy, it's always great to have you on the channel. How are you?
It's great to be back, Mario. Good to see you, my man. Hope you're doing well.
Yes, I am, and I hope you're doing well too. And I guess we picked an interesting day because yesterday, after the markets closed, Fitch downgraded the U.S. credit rating from AAA to AA+. And I like following, it's called Gold Telegraph. I don't know if you've seen them on Twitter.
Yeah, they're really, really, in fact, I sent, whoever runs it, I sent him a message saying your information is as good as anything I find. And he replied back, thank you. But yeah, his info is second to none as far as
and I'll just share some of his comments on what's happened overnight or in the last 24 hours. He says, American debt has been downgraded. Suddenly, people are getting interested in what is happening.
Suddenly.
Yeah, you and I have been talking about this, the debt. Also, we've seen a lot of people tweeting about the interest on the debt approaching $1 trillion. So people maybe are going to wake up now. And he says, though, about an hour ago, the mainstream is acting surprised about the U.S. credit downgrade. This is proof that propaganda exists all over the world. And he's been covering, of course, a lot about the BRICS. But first, if you could go over Fitch and their decision, and what do you think it means? And a lot of people are going back to like 2011 and seeing what happened after that. I'm not too sure. We're in the same situation because when they were downgraded last time, the U.S. by S&P, it was in the middle of the debt ceiling fiasco. Right now, the debt ceiling fiasco was a couple of months ago. So yeah,
if we were any other country besides the World Reserve, we would have been downgraded a long time ago. You mentioned since the debt fiasco. Since the debt fiasco, Mario, the debt is up $1.8 trillion. And look, it took almost 210 years for us to accumulate $1.8 trillion in debt. We did it in 8 weeks after this abomination of the debt ceiling revision again, with no limit as far as how high it can go. We have a $32.6 trillion debt, which ignores the unfunded liabilities largely owed to the American public: Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and government and military pensions. And it's interesting when we talk about downgrading and people being shocked. The 2022 balance sheet for the Fed, or for the government rather, came out not too long ago, and it showed $155 trillion in debt, backed up against $5 trillion in assets, the largest of which is student debt, representing over 30%. Google it, you'll see it. It's nauseating. So the world reserve currency, the land of the free, the home of the brave, the epicenter of financial supremacy, has $150 trillion or is $150 trillion in the hole if you take into account our $5 trillion in assets, of which 30% is the debt of our children. And so it's a joke, and it's something that should have been done, quite frankly, a long time ago. You got the Congressional Budget Office that says by 2040, 100% of all the taxes will be used to pay just the entitlements and the interest on the debt alone. 100%. And so, yeah, I guess, what it really says at that point, there's no money left for welfare. There's no money left for defense. There's no money left for anything. And it's a troublesome realization when you realize that part of the world, or a good portion of the world, is at the same time this is happening, is doing all they can to distance themselves from the dollar. In other words, de-dollarization, and that leads into the BRICS we'll talk about. But yeah, quite frankly, I think this is long overdue, and I think the rating agencies get bullied. As you can see, Janet Yellen's response, calling it ridiculous. It's not ridiculous. It's ridiculous that it hasn't happened long ago.
Yeah, and it's amazing that in 2011 the national debt was about 15 trillion, I think, maybe a little less. And here we are in 2023, and the national debt is approaching 33 trillion, and gold is only like $50 above the high that we made in 2011. Granted that against other currencies like the yen, it's going gangbusters, also against the pound and the Aussie dollar. So
what does that say? It says it's the prettiest mare in the slaughterhouse. It's, you know, to measure it against a basket of depreciating currencies is really, it's illusionary. And, you know, I think people need to kind of realize how big a trillion is. I say it all the time. I say it because it's easy to, you know, it rhymes with million, and a million isn't what it used to be. It's still a lot of money, of course, but it's not what it used to be. A trillion seconds ago, Mario, was 31,688 years ago. 31,688 years ago. That's if you printed dollar bills every second without stopping to reload paper or change ink. It would take you 31,688 years if you were going 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's a little bit bigger than people really think when they hear the word trillion. And when you start to say you're nearly $200 trillion in debt, in liabilities that, you know, 77 trillion unfunded in Social Security and Medicare, and I think the realization that, you know, it's either inflate or die, inflate or default. How do you back away from these kinds of obligations? And to me, this has to be what goes into the thinking of the credit rating agencies. It's not just what we see right in front of us. It's what does it look like out into the future? So yeah, I think it's very much fair. It's very much overdue, and it's a sad statement about where we are in this country in terms of our financial affairs.
Yeah, and I've got a chart here from a chart of gold versus the dollar, of course, from the beginning of 2011, and we can see that it went from 1,300 to I think the high was 1920 in the beginning of September. So a pretty big jump there. And it seems to be the way the managers of the currency and the system play the game. They keep gold and silver suppressed, and then all of a sudden it just bursts up. And then most people who have been frustrated haven't gotten in, and then they get in. It drives the price even higher. And I have a feeling that's what's going to happen now, because I can't really see gold and silver been able to be kept suppressed for much longer. And here's one of silver from the same time period. And I just realized when I put this chart up that I understand why 26 now is such an important level, because if you look in 2011, 26 was a major support. And look how silver went from like around 26 beginning of the year to 50 by the beginning of April. So that's why you need to either be in it. You might be a bit too early, but if you're one day late, it's going to be difficult to get in.
Well, yeah, I think it's important to clarify, at least my feeling is that the price is being betrayed by the continuing draining of all of the world's exchanges, whether you're talking the LBMA, the Shanghai Gold Exchange, the COMEX, or even the ETFs. You know, you're seeing the biggest money in the world, which would be the most sophisticated money in the world. And that's important to understand, that draining these exchanges is anything but straightforward. It's anything but easy to do. And it takes an awful lot of sophistication, an awful lot of money and coordination when you're pulling this kind of money off of the exchanges. But it's not only that. You have the authorized participants that are very privately, very quietly, very methodically draining the ETFs. Last week alone, we saw 200,000 ounces come out of GLD. Now, where the hell is it going? Who's buying it? Why are they backdooring it out of GLD? Remember, we as the investor cannot take possession of the metal held in GLD or SLV. You have to take an extraordinarily large amount. I think the last time I saw it was $18 million, which was a basket of GLD last time I looked at it. But 1.5 million ounces of silver last week was taken out of SLV. And as Ted Butler talks about, not only those amounts, there was much more in the other silver ETFs that was drained. But as he says, this looks much more like metal going to other parts of the world rather than just plain vanilla liquidations. So they use it because it's very opaque, just like they do the tremendous number of exchange for physical contracts that are written on COMEX and then delivered off the LBMA. What you are seeing is the biggest money in the world using the Western price suppression to run cover for draining the cupboards of all of the product. And it's happening at what's really interesting to me above all else, Mario, they talk a lot about the big money always being ahead of the trend, the big money front running, the big money always in position before the crowd or the herd or the little person catches on. And that's why so few people ever really succeed. And what I'm getting at is that, or succeed in investing, I should say. And what I'm getting at is that you look at the top, and there is no question that the biggest exchanges, the epicenters of metal across the globe, are being bled down. That's unequivocal. And, you talk to guys like Ted Butler, they'll tell you there is a shortage of industrial size bars on the exchanges. What's interesting about that, and I would concur, I would agree, the bleed down is incredible. But here again, they're using the suppression of price and rhetoric to run cover for that. But at the same time, the retail market right now is as flush with product as I've seen in 4 years, is showing the lowest premiums I've seen in 4 years. And to me, it's like a hurricane where we got our ass beat by the front end of the storm. And, more people die in hurricanes after the front end comes and you're in the eye and they think everything's fine. They go out for a walk with their dog and bang, they get smacked by the trailing edge that wipes them out before they get home. And it's kind of what I think it feels like to me right now. Why the retail market is so flush with product and availability and the lowest premiums we've seen, and kind of apathy, if you will, all of a sudden with the retail investing public. Yet at the top end, you're seeing a continuing major bleed down of all of the supply, where all of the coin stock comes from is being bled dry methodically, precipitously, and it is not stopping. At some point that trickles down into the retail market. And so I guess I would simply say that if you believe that the most sophisticated, well-funded, well-informed traders on the globe know what they are doing, then that should be a wake-up call to everyone who sees, hey, premiums, prices, availability have never been better, unless you think all of a sudden everything has been fixed. And I don't. And I think it says a lot about the recency bias and the normalcy bias that inflicts people's judgment these days. And quite frankly, this is when you should be buying, when premiums and prices are low, when availability is great, and when there are a million reasons to buy it. Not because we're kind of in the all clear, calm zone somehow, some way. At least that's the way it appears, unless you open your eyes and look around you and see all of the craziness that is happening. And, look, the U.S. has done more to destroy itself in the last couple of years than all of our foes combined could have ever have done, with our obsession with transgenderism and cancel culture and censorship and the way that the law is being applied, and I would say unequally, to the past administration and the current administration, and the wondering what's happened to our institutions that are so sacred to this country, the FBI, the election process, the Justice Department. And, don't think that that's lost on our allies and our foes who are wondering what the hell's going on in the United States. This is a country where people tied tires together with strings and floated across a dangerous ocean to find freedom and liberty and justice. We used to say something in school here called the Pledge of Allegiance, and it would end with liberty and justice for all. But people are wondering, myself included, is there justice for all, equally applied? Is there liberty for all, equally applied, let alone the craziness that we are doing that is eroding the fabric of what made this country what it is? And I hate to say that, but I think it all goes part and parcel with the de-dollarization. It's not just the mismanagement of the world reserve currency. It's not just the weaponizing of the dollar. It's not just the antagonizing and the pushing away of Saudi Arabia. It's also what's happening inside this country. And I think that's a really, really, really big deal. And you have to wonder, is all of this stuff part of the plan? Is it the part of the reset plan? I don't know. But I look around me sometimes and I wonder how in such a short period of time did we get to where we are? There's a term that's called logarithmic decay, which says little by little by little by little, then all at once. They say that's how Hemingway went broke. It's like you're on a river that leads to the Niagara Falls, and all of a sudden you start to slope little by little by little, then all at once. Where are we on that logarithmic decay curve in terms of our the way that socially, morally, economically, with the dollar? Where are we on this curve? And I start to wonder that we are getting close to that all at once point across the board. And you can't just look at one of these things without putting it all together. It's all one big part and parcel. It's all one big thing. It's not just out offshore, it's domestically too. So for people in this country to be surprised, well, I would say that those people who are giving us the news, who would say that they're surprised, well, I think people are following the wrong news channels and the wrong news outlets instead of listening to people like yourself, because I don't know how anyone would be surprised to see the U.S. Be downgraded after the lunacy that we've seen over the last several years. It boggles my mind.
Yeah, what surprises me is how long it, like you said earlier, how long it took them to downgrade again. And what surprises me that they're still rated AA+, because I think it should be much lower. And it's interesting that you spoke about the premiums, that availability for the retail investors is a lot better. And if I remember well, last year and early this year was the other way around. So maybe you could tell the viewers, because I've told my viewers many times that you can go to Miles Franklin and how it works when they contact you.
Yeah, so our website it's up, although it still needs tweaking, and we're putting in the tax software to allow half of the states to place orders on the website. There are taxes, like for example, in the state of Florida, we do tons of business in the state of Florida, but if you do under $2,000, it's taxed. Same thing in California. So our software is being updated as we speak to allow all of the states to place orders, but we only do it up to $10,000. Anything over that, they should send us an email at info@milesfranklin and say, Mineko64 Mario sent me, where we will give them a different price list that has price breaks above 10,000, significant ones at that. We will answer any questions that your viewers have. We take that very, very seriously, but it's important that we know that they came from you. Let us know. We'll get you any product. We won't be undersold, and we will make sure that it's a very, very good experience, Mario. To be recommended by someone of your stature is something we take great pride in, take very seriously, and have great appreciation for that trust that you've bestowed upon us. For what it's worth, I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, and it's interesting you spoke about how everything is kind of near the Niagara Falls, not just economically, but socially, and also internationally, because from what I've read and studied in the last few decades about the dollar and when it would collapse, most of the people that have written about it or talked about it said that it would come from abroad, that foreigners would like want to liquidate their dollars. And that I guess is partly true, because we're seeing the BRICS and the rest of the world trying to diversify. It's not even just get rid of all their dollars, but have an alternative. And I think the biggest mistake that the US made was to do with weaponizing the dollar. And it started before last year. I think it started in 2014 with the Ukraine coup that what was her name? I forgot now, but she said F the EU, right? And they organized a coup there. And the US, I think, has been trying to disrupt that country and disrupt Russia indirectly through that. But what you said, though, it's also from within now, and I think you can't just go back a few years. You have to go back maybe even to 1913 when the Federal Reserve was created, and then 1971, and it's just been a gradual implosion. So yeah, maybe with that, you could talk a little bit about what you're seeing vis-a-vis the BRICS. There's a lot of speculation about the BRICS summit that starts on the 22nd of August. And apart from the BRICS, they're inviting, I think, loads of other countries to that summit. And despite that, the only thing we hear in the mainstream press in the UK and the US is trying to denigrate that group and put them, say that it's not important. And I think people are going to be shocked, just like they were shocked now with the downgrade of US credit.
Yeah, I don't know why anyone would be shocked. Well, I mean, I'm not. People have watched me. This is all I've talked about, over 1,200 YouTube videos in 4 years talking about this exact topic. And it's something that I believe in very, very strongly. First of all, to your point, I wonder how much of this really isn't thought out. Now, why would they do that? Why would they want to see the dollar collapse and reset the system? Well, like I said, we have nearly 200 trillion in debt with 5 trillion in assets. How do you pay that off? You can inflate, you can default. We're not going to be able to produce our way out of it. You could enact massive tax increases. That's not going to be popular. How about you find a villain? And that villain would be Xi Jinping and Putin and OPEC for destroying the American way of life. It's no coincidence to me that the head economic advisor for the United States is a man named Jared Bernstein. People should check him out. You know what his thesis is? To remove and lose the world reserve status. He wrote a report that was picked up by the New York Times, I think in 2014, I want to say, called Dethrone King Dollar, in which he advocates immediately for the dollar losing its world reserve status because of the distortions it creates and the misallocations that it creates and the trade imbalances it creates. And if you wanted to lose the world reserve status, what better way to do it than weaponizing the world reserve currency, making everyone think, are we next? And then number two, piss off and antagonize the Saudis, which is the linchpin of the dollar hegemony. And, is it a coincidence, or are there no coincidences at that level that the man advising the White House, the lead economic advisor, is someone who wants to have no world reserve standard? I'll leave that out there for people to think about. When we talk about the BRICS in the August 22nd meeting, there's been a lot of speculation because of James Rickards, who I happened to have a couple drinks with a few nights ago and picked his brain for over an hour. It was amazing. But James came out publicly and said that they would issue a new currency, settlement currency. We'll talk about that too. A settlement currency backed by gold in the August 22nd meeting, and there's been pushback to that. Some people are saying no, that's not going to happen in the August 22nd meeting. To me, it doesn't matter if it does or does not. It will happen. I believe 100% it will happen, but it doesn't have to happen August 22nd. What I take away from a few things that James talked about, even more relevant than whether or not they issue to the world a new gold-backed settlement currency, would be the fact that I've talked about two other groups. So in my chronology of this, in the progression of my discussions on this, in 2019, it started with really the formation of the Belt Road Initiative. It started with all of the banks repatriating gold and going on a massive buying spree. And the Belt Road Initiative, first of all, let's talk about the fact that every single OPEC country is on the Belt Road, every single one of them, including obviously Saudi Arabia. It's the largest infrastructure project in human history. It's 150 plus countries. It's 75% of GDP right now, excuse me, of human population right now, 50% of GDP as these countries continue to sign on to the Belt Road. You have Saudi Arabia, who has recently applied to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. I talk about them a lot, right? And they're the largest regional military and financial organization in the world. 60% of the Eurasian landmass, 40% of global GDP. I talk about the Eurasian Economic Union. This was started by Russia and all the countries that end in stan, like Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan. All of these countries are in the Eurasian Economic Union. I talk about all of these countries because of the massive crossover in them all. I've said it 100 times, all of them. In almost every speech I give or YouTube, I talk about the Eurasian Economic Union, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Belt Road Initiative, and the BRICS. You put them together, it's 85 to 90% of human population. Well, what do you know? James said they're going to join together and combine in the BRICS. Now, it makes sense to me. In fact, it makes so much sense that if you Google how many countries are in BRICS right now, last year when I gave a presentation at Rick Rule's conference, there were 16. This year when I gave it, just a week ago, when I talked to Jim, it says 41, 41, 41. Well, look at all the articles that say 41 and then count the countries. What do you get? You get 25. Where's the other 16 countries that all of these articles say are 41? If you strip out the countries in the Eurasian Economic Union and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization that have already applied to BRICS or are in it, you get damn near close to 41 when you add them into the BRICS. This is a massive deal. This is a huge deal. Now, I think people are missing the biggest picture when they only focus on the BRICS. The BRICS is a huge deal, but without Saudi Arabia, it's only half the story. Now, what has Saudi Arabia done? Well, as I said, they and every other OPEC country has joined the Belt Road. They have applied formally to the BRICS. They have applied formally to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. They have applied formally to the BRICS New Development Bank, and they told everyone in Davos they're open to taking other currencies for oil. After all, we signed an executive order. The man who shakes hands with the air signed an executive order saying by 2030, we will be like 50% green, and by 2050, 85% green. We are going green. We don't need them anymore. That's what we're telling them, right? We weaponize the dollar. We tell Saudi Arabia we're going green. What more could you do to strip the world reserve status? Was it intended? Is Jared Bernstein's thesis playing out in real time? I don't know. But whether or not they issue a gold-backed currency, these are the countries, and they will, but whether or not it happens August 22nd, who cares? These are the countries that are massively accumulating gold. Hell, right now you can buy oil or sell oil to China for yuan and immediately convert it into gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. They could do that until the new settlement currency comes about. One last piece. James was adamant about the fact that we would see a bond market, making it from a settlement currency to a reserve currency. That's the difference. He said, in World War I, we used patriotism, buy World War I government bonds to support the troops. I had a picture in my house that my dad had growing up of a kid with a tear running down his face with his dad's baseball glove in his hand saying, buy World War I bonds, support the troops. Patriotism was what built our bond market way back when. Well, I couldn't think of a better way for the BRICS issuing a commodity or gold-backed currency using nationalized patriotism to fight back against the Western hegemony to build their bond market, eventually creating a reserve currency. But my point during my presentation there was it doesn't matter when that happens. If it is just a settlement currency and upwards ends of 80 to 90% of the world are settling in a new currency for energy and all sorts of other transactions, like Brazil, the second largest exporter of corn in the world, you and I talked about this before, selling their corn and other items to China for yuan, the settlement status of the US dollar is eroding so much, so rapidly, that eventually it has to have a massive impact on its reserve status. And then you look what Fitch just did, downgrading. At what point do people say, screw it, I'm out, I'm done with this currency? They have no choice but to inflate. They have weaponized the dollar. Are we next? They're pushing Saudi away. They are going to inflate to pay the ever-increasing mountain of debt. It's crazy. It's crazy that people are surprised. And it's crazy that people are surprised about the BRICS, because when you put these groups together, and there is no coincidence that they're all commingled in these groups. I think Russia's the only one that's in all of them. But you look, almost every one of these countries is in more than one, almost all of them on the Belt Road. They're all going to follow the same formula. But it's like the game of Jenga. How many pieces do you have to pull out of the Jenga tower before the whole thing collapses? Little by little by little, then bang, all at once. That's exactly how it's going to happen. But it's not going to be bang all at once until all of the pieces are put in place. Look at who Saudi Arabia is being protected by now. By extension, 2 of the 3 largest nuclear arsenals in the world, right? I mean, at what point does it become unrealistic for the US to fight back against that type of pushback against the dollar in the West? Or is it what they ultimately want? Because now we got a villain to point to, as those sons of bitches did it to us. They ruined the American way of life. How could they? How dare they? Well, we're sorry. Have no fear, though, because Lael Brainerd is here, the #2 economic advisor to the White House, who is the point person for Fed now and has been dealing, go back and forth between MIT and the new digital currency that has been fast-tracked by the Biden administration, the central bank digital currency. We haven't seen it yet, but have no fear. Sign on the dotted line, because, you know, the majority of the money that the U.S. owns, all those unfunded liabilities, 130 trillion or more, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, government, military pensions, it's owed to us. Who's buying all the bonds right now? The foreigners are dumping bonds. It's us. We're leaving the banks because of the systemic risk of the banks and piling into the bond market, right? Just as Fitch downgrades it. So who is all the debt owed to? Lots of it to us. So have no fear. Sign on the dotted line. Take the new CBDC when all hell breaks loose, because it wasn't us. It was them. Forget about the fact that Austrian economics says that it's an increase in the money supply that creates inflation. It was Putin who did it. Forget about everything you've learned. Yeah. Is it intended, Mario? Is this all intended? Don't know, man, but it sure seems like it's plausible.
That's interesting. And before I answer that question, just wanted to say that the Africans are also getting involved, a lot of African countries, with BRICS. And I saw there was a Russian-Africa summit in St. Petersburg, and Russia actually forgave $23 billion worth of African debt, which I think is quite significant. But whether it's intentional, the bringing down of the dollar and the U.S., I'm reading a book. I don't think it's come out. The author sent a copy to me, but it's about, it's called Taking America Back. And the author argues that Henry Kissinger and George Herbert Walker Bush, along with the Rockefellers, they brought China into the to the system back in the early 70s. And their intention is to have the New World Order, and you can't have a New World Order with the U.S. being strong and independent.
And who was just in China, by the way? Who did we just see almost 100 years old?
Yeah.
In China. Isn't that ironic?
Yeah.
You know,
and, I mean, they're going to, like you said, they're going to use China as a scapegoat, because I think George Herbert Walker Bush once said, if the people find out what we've done, they're gonna string us up on lamp posts. So
Right, understood. I get that,
yeah, so I think
and
you're right.
makes
It's
sense.
all done by design, and that's why Nixon pulled the plug on the dollar as well, taking it off gold, and it's been unfortunately downhill ever since for the American public and for the whole world. I think this is not just something that's going to hurt the US, it's going to hurt the UK, Europe, because all our currencies are a derivative of the dollar. So, and it's not going to be that. I think the BRICS and emerging markets, they're not going to have a great time, but at least I think they're becoming more independent, and they're going to catch up with us. I think it was James Wolfenson who was head of the World Bank, and he worked for the big bankers in London and New York. He made a speech to the graduating class at the Stanford Business School, and I've covered that back in 2012 or 2011. And he said the plan was to equalize the West and the East. So I think personally, I think it's all being done by design.
So do I.
I don't care if people call me a conspiracy
No,
theorist.
you're not a you know
No,
what? There's
no,
a
I know
fine
that.
line between, you're the
Yeah,
furthest thing
it's
from it.
just research. You do your research, you read, and you study history, and it's easy to put two and two together.
That's
So
what they want us to, they want people who think rationally and logically to be branded conspiratorialists. There's a fine line between it. You know, the CIA invented that phrase many years ago, and they want people to be branded that. You know, by the way, one other thing that we should mention before we change subject is that, and this is a big deal. They just finished the 23rd summit for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and they finally, according to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and formally welcomed the Islamic Republic of Iran as a permanent member of the world's largest regional military and financial organization in the world. And so, you wonder how a country like Iran sidesteps sanctions. Alistair McLeod says that the Shanghai Cooperation Organization has plans to issue a gold-backed settlement currency for the Eurasian continent. Don't know if that's going to happen or not, but Iran could sell its oil to China or to any of these, and through this network, and get paid in yuan and converted into gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. The West's reach and the sanctions are proving to be less and less and less significant. And then you put into the fact that all of these countries are making their own central bank digital currency. In fact, what I just read was the countries that comprise close to 97% of global GDP have all begun issuing and working on and implementing and developing their own CBDC. It was the Bank of International Settlements that said everyone has to have one by 2025. This will be the way that the lead-in, if you will, into the BRICS currency. But the point I'm getting at is that China and the United Arab Emirates and one other country, I forgot who, maybe Singapore, guess it's irrelevant, they developed something called Project M Bridge, as in money, which allows these countries to trade their central bank digital currencies amongst one another and not using the SWIFT system. The pieces are being put into place militarily, financially, in terms of the way that they conduct business outside the SWIFT system. All of these things are being put into place, and all of these deals that are being put into place, if you don't see this, then you're not looking closely. And for our media to tell us they're surprised about it is no surprise to me. They're a bunch of morons, and everything they say is months after you and I have been talking about it, which is right in front of your face if you open your eyes and look.
yeah, so how do you see things evolving for the US, the dollar, the pound, and the euro? Do you think they're going to bring the system down in order to try to impose like programmable CBDCs? And will they be successful? Because I think people are waking up. I meet more and more people when I go play golf, and they say things that I get shocked. Things that I was looking at when I listened to Alex Jones years ago. So I think I'm not sure if people are going to say, oh, yeah, you brought the whole system down and we've got inflation and you want to solve the problem.
Well, the only way to bring the whole system down is to collapse the whole system. When Klaus Schwab said you'll owe nothing and you'll be happy, well, how do you do that? Well, Mike Adams talks about Project Sandman, where everyone dumps the dollar at once. 130 or 40 countries that have signed on to that. I don't know if it's true. If it is, it would fit very similar to what I believe will happen, and that is when all of these pieces are put into place, when everyone says, let's go, and Saudi Arabia and all of the OPEC countries who are on the Belt Road say, we're not taking dollars anymore. You're going green. We don't like what you're doing to the currency. We don't like what's been done to the bond market. We are going to issue a new or accept a new or a set of new currencies, whether it's the BRICS currency, whether it's the yuan, which they convert into gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange, whatever it is, when they stop taking dollars as the sole settlement currency for oil. Remember that every country on the planet has had to accumulate them for 50 years to buy it. So what happens when they all dump it? It creates a tsunami of inflation that hits our shores. And the byproduct of that is what really Powell would want to do to stop inflation, but doesn't have the courage to do. And that is to spike interest rates high enough to really, really create a problem. Now, in this moment, maybe interest rates go much higher than what I'm talking about. Maybe they go to 20%. Well, how can you have 5% interest rates with 20% inflation? You can't. Your currency dies in days or hours. Instead, you have interest rates that rise to meet the inflation, which is it's the poison pill, because everything in this country is inversely correlated to that moment. They dump dollars. OPEC did it to us. Xi Jinping and Putin incentivized it. How could they do this to us after we protected them forever? How could they? And then everything collapses as interest rates go to the moon. And stocks, bonds, and real estate are inversely correlated on top of a dollar that's getting collapsed. That's four pillars of wealth: dollar, stocks, bonds, real estate, like that. And all it would take would be a Sunday night for OPEC to say, we are done taking dollars for oil. We've made a decision. You're going green. The dollar's being destroyed. And we are joining with 80% of the world's population that isn't going green. And when that happens and everything collapses all at once, including the banks, yeah, you come in and you issue a new CBDC and people will be begging for it because the majority of the debt is owed to us. Sign on the dotted line, take the new CBDC, you will be made whole. Could that happen? Don't know. But where I find things to be most ironic is the number one economic advisor wants to get rid of the world reserve currency, and the number two economic advisor to the US government wants to be a modern monetary theorist directly from the Fed, central bank digital currency. And I mean, you can see how it's being drawn up this way. And we haven't even talked about the pressure on the banks. And you want to issue a CBDC, you got to consolidate the banks. Well, you're going to see that. I think as over $1 trillion in commercial real estate leases and loans come due over the next 18 months or so, some this year, much next year, the strain on the banks will be extraordinary. And all of those loans, the majority of them are non-recourse. These companies just walk away because they're corporations, and that blows up the banks, consolidates the banks, pushes everything towards a handful of large commercial banks. You couldn't draw it up any better. And that's why they say, hey, there's a real fine line between conspiracy and reality, Mario. But how do I think it happens? I think that's the only way you get a reset. That's the only way you get people clamoring for it. But to your point, there's dozens of states in the United States that have already implemented laws allowing gold and silver to be used for legal tender and for all debts, public and private, from paying your property taxes to paying for a round of golf if the golf course decides to allow gold and silver to be used. And the laws actually say if it's a coin issued by a sovereign mint, past or present, it will be the value, the melt value of the coin, plus any market premium. So those institutions like that golf course would have to be aware of what the current premiums are and factor that into what they would take gold and silver for as payment. The bottom line is that, yeah, I think there is a high probability that you have to see some sort of an event to get mass adoption, because there is pushback. there are a lot of states that are pushing back. In fact, DeSantis here in Florida is trying to make it, or may have already said it's illegal in the state of Florida. So yeah, I buy that.
So DeSantis said it's illegal to have gold.
Take the CBDC.
Oh, the CBDC,
make it illegal for people in Florida to not accept the CBDC into the state of Florida.
Yeah, and you talked about the 4 pillars of investment. You know, the real estate, stock market, bond market, and I think the dollar. And said that's gone. You know, but I guess like John Exter's pyramid, gold and silver would be the only things left, and it would.
Well, it's interesting. To your point, you know, there's a term in, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to make one point, and that is there's a term in economics called Gibson's paradox, which speaks to the inverse relationship between gold and real interest rates. Well, if interest rates go to the moon, won't gold get clobbered? No, because it comes in the face of that fourth pillar getting clobbered, and that is the value of the dollar by which we measure it against. But what I will say is that what I think I see coming, and I wish to God I didn't, as I have 3 kids, my youngest being 16, is that he or she who loses least in the next coming event will win. Richard Russell always said that. No one's going to win in this. Everyone is going to face some issues. If the dollar loses its primary world reserve status, and in every single way, this government is fostering and accentuating and accelerating the likelihood of that happening, Mario. I believe it in my soul. So yeah, this is why I tell people to buy gold, not to get wealthy, but because it is wealth that has outlived 2 world wars, German hyperinflation, the Great Depression, and every single thing the world's ever thrown at it. This will be no different. And when you see the most well-funded, well-informed, sophisticated investors on the globe draining the exchanges, to me, that just puts an exclamation point on all of my beliefs that they are front-running, using manipulation and rhetoric to run cover for their repositioning out of the system before all hell breaks loose. And, you know, maybe I'm wrong. I hope I am, but I just have this sinking feeling I'm not.
Great, Andy. Thank you very much for your time. Yeah, hopefully we'll speak again soon.
I love being on here with you, Mario. I think you're one of the very best and brightest minds in the industry. Thanks for having me. And one of these days, we're going to tee it up and play some golf, whether it be in the UK or down here in Florida. I'll make darn sure that. But in the meantime, I will look forward to picking up where we left off, hopefully real soon. And in the meantime, I hope you and everyone out there stays well.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care, buddy.